Hey, welcome to That One Time, the place for unforgettable moments and stories worth sharing. Funny, touching, surprising, just like life itself. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's dive in. I can't stand this any longer. How long are they going to mock me? Am I really just an object to be used thoughtlessly? No, this must end. Sarah threw her medical cap away, but it didn't reach its target, falling to the floor nearby. The young woman hid her face in her hands and choked on muffled sobs. Her friend Laura gently touched the young woman's shoulder, but Sarah sharply pushed her hand away. Laura sighed heavily and went to the table to get Sarah some water. Calm down, don't get worked up. I think everything will become clear. No, well, you told the truth, didn't you? I think Eleanor Vance will sort everything out, Laura murmured. Sarah lowered her hands from her face and suppressed her sobs. She articulated sharply, "She'll sort it out? I beg you, Laura, take off your rose-tinted glasses. Has it ever happened even once that a situation turned out in favor of the rank-and-file medical staff? You know what our chief physician is like. She never admits she's wrong, and she invariably sides with the doctors. And she defends Mark with special zeal. She's ready to grind anyone to dust who dares to speak against him. I know all this isn't accidental, but I don't delve into it. However, when I'm accused so brazenly, and even punished, I'm ready to tear everyone to shreds." Laura cast an anxious glance at the nurse's station door and hurried over to close it more tightly. Then she said in a tense whisper, "Sally, speak quieter. If someone overhears, they'll report it to the administration immediately." "And I don't care. Let them report it. What else can they do to me? I've already received a reprimand, a note in my work record too. They've taken away my bonus, cut my salary for several months, and it's still unknown what will happen next. If they decide to sue me, nobody will protect me. No, this is simply unbearable. I'll just write a resignation letter." And Sarah again hid her face in her hands and let out a muffled, choked growl. Laura sighed deeply and approached her friend. Sarah had always been fiery, but today she seemed to have ignited. Laura tried to find words to calm her storm. "Oh, Sally, enough. You shouldn't talk like that. Who has it easy these days? Do you think it's different somewhere else? It's the same everywhere, and the attitude is the same. You'll just be swapping one bad situation for another. You've been here for 4 years now, you're used to it. You know everyone, and the job suits you. But if you leave, you'll have to look for a place. And who knows, you might find something worse. Drink some water, calm down, dear. And I have to run to surgery, or the surgeons will tear me apart. Come on, pull yourself together." Laura hugged her friend and quickly left the nurse's station. Sarah remained alone. In her hand, she clutched the glass of water. She looked at it and once again replayed the recent events in her mind. Sarah started working at the hospital 4 years ago. None of the surgeons were particularly keen on working with an inexperienced scrub nurse. Sarah was moved from place to place, but the young woman quickly gained the trust of the medical team. At first, they were wary of her, but she performed her duties flawlessly, held herself confidently, and soon became the permanent assistant to one elderly surgeon. She was assigned exclusively to operations with him. Only occasionally did she fill in for sick colleagues and work with other doctors. She worked with this surgeon for just over 3 years, and then misfortune struck. The elderly doctor had a stroke. They saved him, but he could no longer work, and he resigned for health reasons. For about 2 months, Sarah worked with whoever was available, and then a new surgeon was hired. This was the young Mark Dawson, and Sarah became his permanent scrub nurse. At first, the young doctor made a pleasant impression on Sarah, and not just as a surgeon. She developed a liking for him, but after a while, she learned he was married. She was disappointed, but not overly so. The main thing was that he turned out to be a good doctor she could work with calmly. However, Mark Dawson turned out to be not so simple. He had a difficult character. He was cheerful, but knew how to put someone in their place when he deemed it necessary. And Sarah realized that he treated the mid-level medical staff with a slight touch of rudeness. And when she saw how he talked to an orderly, she understood that for him, the junior staff didn't exist at all. Well, that happens, and quite often. Sarah was unlucky, but she quickly learned that if she didn't contradict him, but did everything he required, she wouldn't have to fear for her fate. Clashes with the doctor could be avoided. At the same time, Sarah noticed that something was going on between the chief physician, Eleanor Vance, and Mark. She quite often called him into her office, and after that, Mark would emerge from there looking very pleased. Nobody knew anything for sure, as everyone knew the chief physician's difficult temper. She couldn't stand it if gossip spread through the hospital. And if she found out what was being said about her, whoever was spreading rumors about her would be fired immediately. Nobody risked joking with the administration. Sarah was silent too. She was indifferent to what was happening between them. The only thing that bothered her was the age difference. Mark Dawson was 15 years younger than Eleanor Vance. She was nearly 50 and he was only 35. But as they say, there's no accounting for taste. If there was something between them, it was only on their conscience. And then it happened. That day, Eleanor Vance called her into her office and gave her a proper dressing down. It turned out that a few days ago, they had operated on a man, but during the night, the patient's condition sharply worsened. Mark Dawson was urgently called. He lived very far away, and they would have had to wait a long time for him. The patient underwent emergency surgery, and 3 gauze swabs were removed from his abdominal cavity. When Sarah heard this, she went cold. She understood which patient was being talked about. It was precisely after his surgery that Sarah hadn't counted the instruments and dressing materials. She was obligated to do this every time, and she would have done it. She wanted to do it, but Mark Dawson had given her an urgent errand. He was in a hurry somewhere that day. "Sally, be a dear and run quickly to the nurse's station. My suit from the dry cleaners should have been delivered there. I warned the nurse on duty. Pick it up quickly and bring it to the doctor's lounge. And make me a little coffee while you're at it. I love how you make it specifically. You have some special proportions. The coffee turns out so tasty. Be quick about it." "But Mark Dawson, I haven't checked yet," Sarah objected, but didn't manage to finish. "Don't worry then, I'll check everything for you. Everything will be perfectly fine. The surgery went successfully, easily, and quickly. I'm sure we did everything perfectly. I'll check everything myself, and you go do what I tell you." Sarah looked around helplessly. Nobody had heard their conversation, as the surgeon had said all this quite quietly. Well, if he was going to check it himself, that was even better, and Sarah ran to carry out her doctor's errand. Now Eleanor Vance was eager to know how exactly these gauze swabs ended up in the patient's abdominal cavity. If Sarah hadn't checked everything, it was a gross violation. "I really didn't check the dressing materials, but only because Mark Dawson said he would check them himself," Sarah squeezed out. Eleanor Vance knitted her brows menacingly. "You even thought of trying to please him? What are you talking about? Is the doctor supposed to perform your duties? What kind of novelty is this?" "But I'm telling the truth. Mark Dawson gave me an errand. I wanted to finish my work, but he sent me to the nurse's station. He himself told me not to worry." Eleanor Vance slammed her fist on the table and stood up. "How dare you lie so brazenly? You wretch! Did you decide to slander a respected surgeon? Why would you need to do that? Did you set your sights on him and he didn't reciprocate? Is that it, right? Are you in your right mind? Mark Dawson has a wife, and he's a decent man. He wouldn't lie to his chosen one." "But I'm telling the truth, Eleanor Vance," Sarah objected. "And I'm telling you again, you're lying brazenly, you rude girl. Do you think I haven't spoken to Mark Dawson? I already called him in this morning, and he told me everything," the chief physician stated firmly. Sarah sank onto the chair helplessly. She looked at the chief physician in confusion and quietly stammered, "And what did he tell you?" Eleanor Vance smirked. "As if you don't know. He told the truth, that he asked you to finish your work quickly because he needed to run to the nurse's station to pick up his suit, and you offered him that you would run there yourself, and he could do your work for you, and then finish the surgery with the help of another nurse, and he strictly told you that you must finish your work first. Why did you do that? Why did you tell him you had counted everything? Why did you let him down like that? You lied, didn't finish the work, left, and yet the doctor trusted you. Well, if you thought your trick would go unpunished, you are mistaken. Now you will get what you deserve. You are losing your bonus for 6 months. You will only receive your base salary without allowances. I will see to it that there is a note about your dishonesty in your work record. If you decide to quit after such a note, no one will hire you anywhere else. Now go. I find you repulsive, you liar." Sarah could no longer utter a word in her defense. The chief physician didn't believe her anyway. She was entirely on Mark Dawson's side. She defended and covered for him very zealously. Sarah sighed and drained the glass of water. She had almost calmed down, but she hadn't resigned herself to her situation. No, that wouldn't happen. She wouldn't resign herself. She was going to do something else. She was going to get revenge on Mark Dawson, and she had to act cautiously so as not to alarm some of the participants in this drama. An operation was scheduled for the evening. Sarah prepared for the encounter with Mark Dawson. When he saw the nurse, he frowned. He expected her to avoid him or throw a tantrum, but Sarah calmly greeted him and then said, "There seems to have been some misunderstanding. I apologize for letting you down. I should monitor the performance of my duties more carefully. I won't repeat my mistakes in the future." Mark Dawson smirked arrogantly. He understood that Eleanor Vance had put the nurse in her place and the surgeon had managed to avoid punishment. "Yes, well, make sure that doesn't happen again. The patient almost lost his life because of you. Do you think this is a joke? No, my dear, this is a serious matter. I told you not to leave until you were finished, and you let me down. You said you checked everything and ran off. A fine mess. If I ran off like that without finishing the surgery—" Sarah barely restrained herself from lunging at the arrogant surgeon, but she gathered all her willpower and simply remained silent. The surgery went quickly. Now Sarah performed her duties with even greater diligence. She knew she could be set up at any moment. After her shift, she went home. She didn't eat, didn't drink coffee. She simply lay down on her bed in the dark and fell asleep. Starting the next day, Sarah began to carefully watch Eleanor Vance and Mark Dawson. At every opportunity, she walked past the chief physician's office, listening to what was happening behind the door. Mark Dawson often visited his boss's office, but Sarah didn't hear anything when she walked by. She needed to be sure that there was something going on between them, and then it would be a simple matter. She just needed to get the right information to Mark Dawson's wife. Sarah learned that the surgeon's wife was named Vanessa, and she was the daughter of an influential man. If Sarah could prove that Mark Dawson was straying, he would have serious problems. She greatly hoped for this. She also hoped that Eleanor Vance would face problems too. Time passed, but all attempts to find out anything about the relationship between the chief physician and the surgeon were unsuccessful. Sarah began to lose patience and hope. Would she really not be able to get revenge on her offender? Was this fair? She tried her best to be polite to him, but it became more difficult each day. The resentment and harm inflicted upon her were too great. The patient who suffered due to Mark Dawson's fault was discharged and did not file a complaint against the hospital. In this at least, Sarah was lucky. It was still unknown how everything would have ended if the hospital had been sued. 2 months passed, and finally luck smiled on Sarah. She managed to catch Eleanor Vance and Mark Dawson. It was late in the evening, and only the on-call shifts remained in the hospital. Sarah should have been home long ago, but she had stayed late. She had a severe stomachache, and she had lain in the nurse's station for a long time after taking a pill. When she finally felt better, she got ready to go home. As she was heading towards the elevator, she remembered that she wanted to take her medical uniform home. She had badly stained her trousers. She sighed and went back. She turned the corner of the corridor and saw from a distance that the door to the chief physician's office was ajar. Sarah frowned and slowed her pace. To herself, she was glad she was wearing sneakers. She stopped about a meter from the door. She couldn't see what was happening inside, but she could hear perfectly. Holding her breath, she listened. "But why are you making me so jealous of you?" she heard Mark Dawson's voice. Eleanor Vance's playful laugh was heard. "Hey, my dear, what are you imagining?" And then Sarah realized this was her only chance. She carefully took out her phone, which was always on silent mode when she was at work, and pressed the voice recorder button to record the conversation. "Why would I be imagining it? That young intern was in your office all day today. Did you decide to trade me in for a younger lover? Eleanor Vance, I'm not just anyone off the street, and you shouldn't play these games with me, said Mark Dawson. Oh, Mark Dawson, are you trying to assert your rights? Look what you've come up with. You have a wife, go command her. Your Vanessa probably puts up with it, but I won't. I'm not your legal wife for you to command me. I'll be the one commanding you, because you're only here thanks to me. All I have to do is snap my fingers and you'll be out of here, replied Eleanor Vance. Mark laughed. I like today's games. You'll be my strict mistress today. Well then, I agree to do everything you say. Only please, let's not talk about my wife anymore. You know that Vanessa is of no interest to me. Eleanor Vance giggled. All right, I won't talk about your wife. Go, close the door so no one disturbs us. Sarah went completely cold. If either of them looked out of the office now, Sarah wouldn't go unnoticed. Her entire plan would collapse, and she would have even more problems than before. But she was lucky. The door simply slammed shut. The click of the lock closing was heard. Sarah was able to breathe out. God, I need to get out of here immediately. She stopped the voice recorder, pressing her phone as if it were a treasure. She carefully turned around and began to walk slowly. The further she went, the faster she moved. Only when she reached the elevator did she smile, looking at her phone. How lucky she was. This was incredible luck that she managed to overhear this conversation. Now she would be able to get revenge. This would be quite enough for her. And now you'll get what you deserve from me, she whispered to herself. A few days later, she managed to find out Mark Dawson's wife's phone number. He often gave her his phone to leave it charging, and Sarah took advantage of this. She wanted to send the recording to the surgeon's wife, but she didn't know how she would react. For several days, she pondered the best way to proceed. A week later, Sarah went on vacation, and on the very first day of her vacation, she decided to call Mark's wife herself. Perhaps the woman wouldn't answer, seeing an unknown number calling, but it was worth a try. Strangely, she answered immediately. Hello. Excuse me, we don't know each other, but I know your husband. I work with him. I really need to meet with you. Only please, don't tell your husband anything, otherwise I'll be fired, and I can't lose my job. I beg you, please give me 10 minutes when we meet. I won't keep you longer, but I really need to tell you something. It's very important. And once again, luck smiled on Sarah. Vanessa agreed to meet her that same day in 2 hours. When Sarah arrived at the small cafe where Vanessa was already waiting for her, she was taken aback. This young woman was her age, and she was very pretty and sad. So, what did you want to tell me? Vanessa said after the greeting. Sarah, stumbling over her words, told Mark Dawson's wife everything and played her the recording. Vanessa listened to it with a stone face through her headphones. Her eyes didn't blink. She only turned very pale. When she took off the headphones, she looked intently at Sarah. Why do you want this? Why are you doing this? Sarah opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. And then she told the truth. She told how Mark Dawson had set her up, how she had suffered, losing more than half of her earnings, and that she wanted to teach the despicable surgeon a lesson. Vanessa nodded her head and then said thoughtfully, My father told me that Mark was a scoundrel, but I didn't believe him. I believed Mark. Recently, I started suspecting that he was leading me on. I had him followed, but he went nowhere except work. I couldn't even imagine that he was having an affair at work. Well, thank you. I think there's nothing more for us to say. Oh, by the way, I would like to compensate you for the damage caused to you because of my husband. Sarah waved her hands. Nay, no, not at all. I don't need anything. Vanessa nodded. She transferred the recording to her phone, then returned Sarah's mobile and stood up. Very well, as you wish. Goodbye. Sarah sat in the cafe for about 10 more minutes. She wondered how her interference in someone else's personal life would turn out. Had she done the right thing? A week later, when Sarah returned to work from her vacation, she learned the latest shocking news. Eleanor Vance had been fired. She no longer worked at the hospital. It was rumored that she had moved to another city. Mark Dawson had also resigned, and his wife had left him. She divorced him. Nobody knew the true reasons for the events that had occurred. Everyone wondered what could have happened for two prestigious positions on the staff to become vacant at once. She knew that the reason for such changes was herself and her plan for revenge.